introduce our keynote speaker for the day, but I'll give you a little bit of background on myself and our speaker before we get started. I am an employee of the EMHS Foundation, so we do all of the fundraising for EMHS and all the member organizations. And I see we have the EMMC Cancer Center here today, so I'm very happy to see that. Jenny is also an employee of the EMHS Foundation, and Jenny's focus is on Champion the Cure Challenge, so I'm sure many of you have heard of that, which is of course associated with the EMMC Cancer Center. So Jenny is going to talk to you a little bit today about her story and her journey through cancer. And if it hits you anything like it did me, I know that you will be, you will leave with a feeling of hope and inspiration, because Jenny is just amazing, and I'm honored to not only call her a colleague but also a friend. And when you hear her story, you will love her even more than you do when she started. So welcome, Jenifer Lloyd, and
what a good friend she is indeed, because I am showered thanks to Nicole Trainer's showers. Still without power. So thank you for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity to come before you all. But before I start talking, I'd love to find out who I'm speaking with. So I'd like to find out who in the room identifies as a cancer survivor. Okay, well, majority of you. And who in the room would be a medical professional? Any medical professionals also survivors? Okay, very minority, but that's often the case. So, well, how many of you have heard my story before too? There's that. Oh, good. That takes a lot of pressure off, because I was going to apologize. If you've heard it before, I'm so sorry, because there's really not a lot I can do about it, because it's my story. I can't really change it much. So I'm going to take you back in time. And it was one of the perfect spring days that come in Maine, you know, when the light just starts to shine a little differently, giving you enormous hope that those long, dark days of winter are past and that summer is really going to come. And I was sitting in my home filled with light. My daughters were going through the after-school banter that was very common then. My junior in high school, Lily, was practicing her lines as Lady Macbeth. The drama. It was awesome. I loved every minute of it. But Becca, she had drama of her own. She was contemplating dresses for her 8th grade social. Nerve-wracking. The phone rang, and I innocently picked it up to hear, Jenny, this is your doctor. You have breast cancer. Well, you know, I was naive enough to not understand that was news that you got over the phone. I really believed what I had seen on TV and in movies, that when dire news needed to be given to a patient, that they were, you know, cautiously brought into an appointment with their doctor, a box of tissues carefully placed in front of them, someone there to hold their hand, when someone very kindly said to them, we've got some bad news. Well, there's probably good news too. You know, someone that was going to make it a little bit better. I wasn't expecting an abrupt shock to my very beautiful and bright, soon-to-be summer day. So very quickly, the light that was illuminating my home just vanished. And far too quickly, my house was filled with well-meaning friends. You probably have those as survivors. You know, the kind that all just want to come in and tell you how beatable your cancer is. Well, they all had stories of how beatable breast cancer was. And while they were very well-meaning, and they probably only stayed an hour, it seemed like they were there forever. I couldn't wait for them to leave, because their presence was just now a stark reminder that my life had changed. I had cancer. And then began the wrestling. I was wrestling with deep questions. As a person of faith, I was not expecting the anxiety that was overwhelming me. I had been told that, you know, my anxiety would be pushed aside by my faith, but yet that wasn't my experience. And things moved very quickly. In fact, within 1 week, I received an axillary node dissection and lumpectomy, and I was diagnosed with stage 2B, grade 3, HER2 positive invasive ductal carcinoma. I had breast cancer. There was no doubt about it. And as much as my husband tried to prevent me from Googling, getting off of the computer, I would sneak in and sometimes find out a little bit more about this pesky HER2 problem that I could see was researching himself. And at that first meeting with my oncologist, I knew just enough to be dangerous, so much so that I was not even really able to sit up during the appointment. I laid on the bed in the room, 2 friends and my husband present, when he asked the question, will Jenny receive Herceptin? No, I'm sorry, she doesn't meet the clinical trial criteria. Well, for me, I was being lined up with every other option, and the model went into the computer and it showed that, I had this percentage outcome if we did chemo, and then this greater percentage if we added radiation, and I left with a pretty great percentage and complete fear and disbelief that chemo was now a part of my life, because I think that scared me more than the cancer did. But my husband left preparing life as a single dad, being told that Herceptin was not going to be offered to me. I was unaware that it was that dire. I began standard protocol. Many of you probably have been given that recipe for success. 8 rounds of dose-dense chemotherapy followed by radiation, and during those times, if you are walking through it, I, like you, felt sheer exhaustion and a lot of guilt. Back then, there wasn't blogs and social media, and there was just this common understanding that, people got cancer, and breast cancer, well, gosh, women got that. They went off to climb Mount Kilimanjaro. I know a woman who got breast cancer and then literally wrote a book and climbed Mount Kilimanjaro. I was in the fetal position, and I was crying behind the door so that my children didn't see me, and feeling like somehow I was not successful yet. I wasn't doing the things that made you successful at beating cancer, whatever those things were, because I was crying a lot privately. I was tired, I was achy, I was nauseous, and I could no longer recall life in a well body. How many of you know what that feels like? Like, you just don't remember what it feels like to not feel awful. The effects started to show in my outward appearance, and I shirked at my own face as I passed mirrors. I looked like Dracula, and gray skin and a bald head. It was just hard to recognize myself. I had cancer. And as the weeks and months passed, I would look to my children and trying to capture and wonder to myself, how long am I going to have this privilege? Becca, my youngest, slept on a small couch in my bedroom. She could not leave me. She seemed fearful of spending any time away, lost a lot of time at school. Lily, though, couldn't bear the pain of not being able to change things. She was the oldest of 2 girls, so she wanted to fix it, couldn't fix this thing. So she poured herself into her schoolwork. She knew far too much to feign a cheerful smile. And with each day that passed, we struggled, as many families do when they're facing cancer or any other type of disaster. We struggled to find new ways to cope. Upon what was to be the conclusion of my chemo, I received the news that aggressive cancer that I had was going to get a new treatment option. It sent some new optimism from my formerly very stoic oncologist. She sat with me, and I think that was the first time I saw her smile. She said, okay, Jenny, so we need to talk about Herceptin. Tom, I could tell, was delighted to have this conversation, and she said, there are some serious things we need to consider, because there are women that are receiving this drug that they've had heart attacks, so there is a concern. And I remember laughing at her and saying, okay, heart attack, cancer, ding, ding, ding. I pick heart attack because, if we're gonna go out like that sounded like a better way to go. So I said yes to Herceptin, and that meant for me it was going to be another year going into the chemo room every other week to receive my infusion. But thankfully, that year, based on the data that was known then, could reduce the risk of me dying from the disease in half. So there was just no question, right? That was a yes. It was a big, big yes. What was so wonderful about it is that it was affecting women who were diagnosed with a very unusual type of breast cancer, one that only affected about 25% of the population. And I know men also get breast cancer. I apologize for always referring to women. It's just the majority, unfortunately, are those of us gals, and 25% that get the HER2 diagnosis, which the HER2 standing for the HER protein that stimulates cell proliferation, and in some types of breast cancer, HER2 is overexpressed, and it causes those cells to just reproduce uncontrollably. And in 2005, when I was diagnosed, before Herceptin was part of care, those with the HER2 diagnosis did well for a period of time, a couple of years, and then usually a relapse, and then by year 5, which was my husband's understanding as to his preparation as a single dad, those women weren't around anymore. But Herceptin became that game changer. It was unlike chemotherapy. It's a targeted treatment. It was one of the first in talking about personalized medicine that's now such a common conversation. And it only killed the bad guy. So it meant that my hair got to return, that thing that makes you feel so remarkably like a cancer patient, that thing that startles you when you pass a mirror. Well, my hair began to grow, and because it was only affecting the bad guy, I only kind of felt a little weird or not right for about 24 hours, and I satisfied that weird or not right by eating a bagel, and then the next day wanting to consume nothing but pizza and bread. It somehow made me feel better, and I did okay, and I was thrilled that I was able to somehow have something working within my body to affect change against this deadly disease, and I didn't feel terrible. So my hope began to emerge. It started to grow, and mirrors became more palatable. Little by little, the cloud of fear that I was walking under began to lift. I asked my husband less and less through tears if I was going to die. I don't know how often I made him go through that commotion, but it was too often for him, and I'm sure too often for myself to be healthy, but it was part of my process. I desperately wanted the truth, and I could tell he was lying quite often. How many of you have seen the movie Waking Ned Devine? Oh, well, it'll apply to some of you. I love that movie, and if you haven't watched it, humor really is good therapy. What About Bob? That became a staple. I watched that far too many times. But Waking Ned Devine is another favorite, and so I'll try to bring you into this scientifically accurate movie as a metaphor for my dilemma. So it's a small Irish village, little prospect of financial means. They devise a scheme to benefit from the winnings of a lottery ticket held by the dearly departed Ned Devine. And to receive their winnings, they have to convince the authorities that Ned Devine is alive and well. Well, cancer is the antagonist, Lizzie Quinn, who threatens to expose the town's only hope. She's just the killjoy. And a perfect actress plays her. She just looks miserable. So she's threatening to expose the town's only hope and rob its residents of its future. You know, but in this way, Herceptin's that lottery ticket. When cashed in, Herceptin brings life to the patient, as does the winnings to that little Irish village. So, like most who have faced cancer, the threat of recurrence is all too present. And HER2 positive cancer, when it does recur, doesn't typically go to the breast, but metastasizes to the liver, the lungs, the bone, the brain. Brain is a more pesky place for Herceptin to travel. But thankfully, we have researchers who I have grown to love. Because researchers aware of this deficit have been diligently at work over the decades since my original diagnosis, and where targeted therapies were the big booming promise. Because of all of that thriving research, we now talk about immunotherapy, which is even more incredible. So that HER2 positive diagnosis, which was so ominous and had such a dreadful predictor of my future, well, now it's gone. And what used to be for women or men diagnosed with a HER2 positive disease being such a terrible prognosis, now it's the hope. Well, there's all sorts of options when that's part of the initial diagnosis. And so clearly I've outlived those earlier predictions. On March 24th of 2018, I'll celebrate 13 years. Can you believe it? 13 years. And, you know, to people who meet me today, unless I tell them, there's no evidence of the peril that I once faced. And occasionally I'll look at the very few photos that I allowed to be taken during that time, and I can hardly recognize the woman that I was. I'm often struck by the unknown. How is it that I live and I breathe and I enjoy life? Why did I get the chance to see high school graduations and a wedding and a grandchild and so many others, sometimes with a much more favorable upon initial diagnosis, prognosis, struggle with metastatic disease? A battle that's never won, it's just lived with. I have zero answers to that question. But this is what I do know that excites me. Really, really great minds are seeking the answers to those and to all those complex questions. And they are, when they're perplexed, they're driven by their scientific minds to find answers. There is no cancer conspiracy. I'm so glad this is live, just for that. Because it's on Facebook where I see a lot of those. I see a lot of people claiming that don't get chemo, don't trust your doctor, don't trust the oncological community, because somehow they're hiding that great secret that there's a cure for cancer. Well, golly gee, if there was a cure for cancer, we would all know. Because don't we know the telephone game? There is no way to keep a secret that big for this long. And cancer's just not that simple. People want it to be simple, and it would be wonderful if it was so simple that you could just keep a secret and that there really was a cure, but cancer's lots of diseases. And even in breast cancer, there's lots of diseases. It's not just one. That's why what was right for me may be not right for you. You can't maybe have a lumpectomy if there's a different scenario at place. That's why you need the really brilliant oncologist who really does care and is not keeping a secret, and is often motivated by the fact that they too have had family and friends facing the disease, and some of them have faced it themselves. You know, I once thought that cancer would forever change me, and that I couldn't be the woman that I once was, and I learned that that was right. I am changed, and it's not in the way that I once envisioned, though, because moments before picking up the phone that spring, I was blissfully naive to a world of diagnostic tests and hushed discussions between care team members and my husband, the weighing of treatment options and of side effects and of hair loss. That's a fun one. But I was also very naive to the incredible world of cancer research, the kindness of oncology support staff. I see you, Rebecca Daigle. You're awesome back there. All you do to take care of patients. I got to meet her. I got to have her on the radio. That was a treat. You know, watching what they do in research, that thrills me. And to see the changes that have been made just in the last 5 years is unbelievable. You know, 13 years ago, no one talked about cures for cancer. That was a no-no in the medical world. That was something you avoided because you didn't want to bring false hope to a very difficult situation. But now there are types of cancers where the word cure that's part of the equation. So that's an awesome thing. And I'm just here to tell you that if you're in a place like I was 13 years ago and your situation is dire today, it may not be tomorrow, because really smart people are working on your behalf. Even with obscure cancers, there are things that breast cancer research has affected other types of cancers. So there's that. So even if you're in that place, you can hang on for some real hope that someone is fighting for you. You know, there's a saying that once you're exposed to a part of the world, to an injustice, to a need, that you can no longer ignore it. You have seen it, and thus you're now responsible. Well, I'm glad I was given a chance to be a part of affecting change, and I can thank Michael Crowley for that, because he allowed me, a volunteer for the Capital Campaign for the Cancer Center, to come on board to help raise money for an event that they'd never had before in 2010, in the hopes that research dollars would be allocated so that real research could happen in Brewer, Maine, to find out why this area is so hard hit with cancer, and we could attract really incredible people to work in the really amazing building that is EMMC Cancer Care within the Lafayette Family Cancer Center. I had never done a fundraising event. I had no idea what I was doing, and I wrote a resignation letter right after I told him yes, but clearly I never delivered. I was very afraid of failing because you all and my friends were the ones that I would be failing, people that needed this money. But I'm here to tell you that obviously it worked because people around here got that message that they knew this money was going where we said it was going to go. It's staying local. It's going right into the hands of those that need it. And they are using it to develop an incredible research program, so much so that it's attracted the only collaboration in the state of Maine with Dana-Farber. Now, I benefited from that. Everybody's benefited from that for many, many years. The relationship that EMMC Cancer Care has as a top-notch cancer center, and Dana-Farber was there even in 2005 for me. I mean, my oncologist, Dr. Garrett, consulted with Eric Weiner, who's the chief of breast cancer oncology at Dana-Farber, even then. But now it's different. A collaboration is a real partnership that allows greater access to clinical trials so that you and your family and friends, when you find out that there's something out there that's better, you don't have to drive another, for you all, if you're down here, another 5 hours down the road to get that thing that might be like my Herceptin. You only have to get to Brewer and sit in that beautiful place, preferably by the fire. And if you have to go lots and lots, well then there's Sarah's house, which is across the way, and you know, things are made easier because people around here got it, and they started coming and showing up every August for Champion the Cure Challenge. They started giving money for research, and they built that program, and new and novel treatment options are being availed to our friends and neighbors, to Maine residents. And our situation is a lot like what's happening all over the country. People are getting that giving money directly to their cancer center, putting it right in the hands of a research institution, is the best shot at seeing this disease defeated. Because what we say, what I like to tell people is, research brings tomorrow's hope to today's patients. Well, many of you are today's patients. How many of you are today's patients, not yesterday's? Good number of you are today's. And we're all believing we're never going to do it again, right? But it could be tomorrow's. It's just how it is. So I'm very grateful that while cancer has changed me, it's been replaced by hope, because I see good people just like you, affected by the disease, having a place to put your resources to affect change, to support research, and to see people's lives change so that they can too, just like me, be there for the high school graduations and the weddings and the grandbabies. There's another grandbaby to come. So I want you to have that same hope that I have today. And I'm believing, I had to ask my daughter, what do you want me to be called as a grandmother? And she said, well, that's up to you. You know, so there's all, like, I'm way too young to be grandmother. So that wasn't off the table. So then we had other options. It would be Mimi. I'm not as sweet as a Mimi is. That wouldn't work. But I decided upon Gigi, because I decided that I was going to prophesy my future. Because Gigi is really great-grandmother. So I'm going to be here. And every time I look at little Arthur, my first little grandboy, I remind him that I'm going to be here to see his children, and I'm going to dance at his wedding. So that's why I want to continue to raise money for research, to give all of those who are facing cancer today and that will face cancer tomorrow that same hope. And that's why we can rest easy, because there are lots of people, thousands of them, who believe in that same purpose and are fueling that research so that immunotherapy is not so unusual. But yet chemotherapy, oh, I can't wait for the day when we learn that nobody receives chemotherapy as part of a treatment plan anymore. That will be the dinosaur that we all scratch our heads and go, wow, really? Gigi, you had chemotherapy? leeches. Like, what? You did that? Yes, I know. There were no computers, and I didn't have a cell phone, and there was no whatever social media thing that you all are doing. But so that's really my hope, and I hope for all of you that has given you a bit of encouragement that you can take from today. But before I leave, I'd love to know if there are any questions that you might have for me. Because I hate to leave a crowd that, especially where those of you are walking in that place every day, facing the disease. I'd love to be able to answer any questions that you have, and there really is none that are too personal, even with Facebook Live. I will answer it all. So. And if you are struggling with should I not ask a question, please ask a question, because now I've opened it to the floor, and to not have a question would be very awkward, especially with Facebook Live. So what can I answer for you? Yes?
I have a question.
Sure.
Does 100% of the donations to Cancer Care Maine go to research?
Oh, I'm so glad that you asked. It depends on where you donate to cancer care. We have a lot of ways you can help patients there. If you choose to donate through Champion the Cure Challenge, yes, all of the donations that participants give goes directly to that cause, goes to research. And right now we have a match through the Woodcock Foundation, which is so generous that matches every gift. But there are many ways that you can give to EMMC Cancer Care, and it does go directly to the cause that you identify. Thank you for asking that. Yes, ma'am.
Yes, my husband and I belong to a prostate cancer support group where men and women attend.
Nice.
I've noticed that for most breast cancer support groups, it's women only. And I was wondering why that is so. Why don't they include men, since when cancer hits, it affects the whole family?
Oh boy, does it. That's a really good point. I could have benefited from something like that early on, because cancer did a great job of really ripping apart my daughters emotionally. In fact, my youngest, it took her the hardest to recover from that. So having us, even as a family, or bringing my spouse would have been great. I know some people that are very active. Caring Connections is very active in that, and there, I think, Robin, if you want to raise your hand, she's a person that you might want to talk to after, because maybe, is there something that you have, Robin?
I was going to say, I think the point is well taken that at our men's cancer group, spouses are welcome, but then in our breast cancer group, you get a good point. It's breast cancer survivors. But what we do is have activities where the whole family is welcome.
Nice.
But it's a good question, though.
Well, maybe you could help that get started. You know, a breast cancer couple that wants to be a powerhouse behind that. All it takes is one person, right? Somebody else will show up. Eventually somebody else will join the party. So thank you for that. Anybody else? Well, it's been a privilege, and I'm excited to see so many of you smiling. It means that you're doing pretty well. And I saw all of the food, and people have appetites, so I love seeing that. That's exciting. And you've got a great day of programming in front of you. So thank you so much for having me, and I really appreciate the time. Oh my goodness.
Watercolor of that.
Beautiful.
Oh. Thank you very much. And are you going to be around for this?
Oh, this is, I have to. See, these are those moments when you just know things work out the way they're supposed to. This location has become very special to my family. It's kind of therapeutic. We sit under those little yellow umbrellas every summer, and without question, there's a time when I grab my husband and I whisper in his ear that I can't believe I still get to be here. So this means quite a bit. Thank you very much.